And you're gonna, I think we should not record yet though.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Whenever you want to start, go for it, Baerbel.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Not quite yet. We have slow internets. There we go.
There.
Great.
Okay.
Perfect.
Let's see how this goes. So yeah, I would like to say thank you for inviting me. My name is Baerbel Ehring. I've been with Oneida County Land and Water Conservation since 2016, and I've created multiple pollinator plantings and had workshops on what to consider for pollinator plantings. I'm now mostly active in lake restoration. So just to put a little bug in your ear, if you have any interest in and you live on a lake, you can always call the county and we can see what might be what possibilities there may be to do some improvements along your shoreline. Anyways, today we're going to talk the perfect pollinator garden and what is the background, why are we even interested in these kind of plantings and what is there to consider. So first of all, we are all dependent on pollinators. As a human species, at this moment, about a third of our food comes from agricultural products that are dependent on insect pollination. And we are experiencing a global decline in pollinators. So I just want to give a little overview. Most pollinators that we know are bees and butterflies. However, there are also in some countries bats. Then the hummingbirds are considered pollinators. And of course, you know, the random insects that crawl around. You can even consider a mosquito a pollinator since they're nectar drinking. So just to give a little visual, this is a Whole Foods supermarket produce department with consideration of existence of bees. So you see the produce department, how you're probably used to it. And now this is it without the existence of bees. A lot less variety. Are the pictures going through? Like, am I talking in accordance with the pictures?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. So, yeah, what is, where do we come in? So with this pollinator decline, our own dependence on the, you know, on our existence and their existence and correlating, we certainly have an interest in building a pollinator community. Here is a little overview. Since the 1950s, about 50% of the European honeybees have declined. Also, the native North American bee species have declined by over 50%. And all that while at the same time, the demand on crop pollination is rising because human population numbers are on a steady increase. So something's not matching. A little overview, how are they different for in reference to the pollination and in some of their just habits or preferences. So here in our area, when we speak of native pollinators, we're talking about native bees and native butterflies primarily. We also have the European honeybee here, which, as the name says, is not a native to the area. One of its benefits are that you can move the hives around. However, they're not adapted to the Wisconsin climate, nor have they evolved or developed in synchronicity with the native wildflowers. So they're also preferring warmer and drier conditions, while native pollinators can be active when it's cool and damp, especially bumblebees. You will find in flowers when it's pretty rainy. In fact, you can see them finding shelter under leaves, while you wouldn't see any European honeybee around. And our native pollinators are a lot more efficient in smaller numbers. As you can see, just a comparison of the same area being pollinated by 250 mason bees versus 15,000 to 20,000 honeybees. So here are some pollinators in our area that are considered at risk. Most of us know the monarch butterfly, which I saw my first monarch butterfly 2 days ago. They have arrived. Today I saw about 10. So they're back. Then we have the rusty-patched bumblebee, which is considered federally endangered, and the yellow-banded bumblebee, which is also a species of concern. I have to move my thing over here. There. So what are some of the reasons for the decline of pollinators? Well, there's certainly many different variables that are interacting. So we are facing a habitat loss for the insects, which part of the reasons are our agricultural system, which is mostly based on monocultures, human development, and then a change in the environment and ecology with invasive species moving in and pushing some of the native wildflowers out. Then another reason, disease, which especially the European honeybee is struggling with, is this varroa mite. That mite can eradicate whole colonies of the European honeybees. And there are some other viruses which we are used to different viruses and different moments of intense outbreaks now. So that's what the insects are facing too, with their own versions. Climate change. I know that many of you are interested in climate change, and just like any other species on this planet, climate change is affecting bees and butterflies and all the other insects too. So harsh seasons, the extreme temperature fluctuations, and of course droughts are creating rougher conditions. Then another really big reason for the decline is actually the use of chemicals in various settings. And one of them is obviously agriculture, because our interest in the crops is, we want to get our crops for our own needs. And so there are very many practices on this planet which use pesticides. And some of the pesticides contain a chemical group called neonicotinoids. And this group of chemicals, which I would like to invite you to study this table in the recording, to see, in detail which of these products contain neonicotinoids, because a lot of times we may not be aware of that being part of the product we're using. So this chemical group leads to a reduction of navigation skills, sense of smell, and creates longer maturation periods for the insects in their life cycle. And all that leads to lower survival rates. Then another area, and that's probably something all of us are aware of here, is chemical exposure through mosquito spray. Probably all of you have seen the advertisement billboards in the area right now. They're out with people getting their yard sprayed for ticks or mosquitoes. However, unfortunately, these sprays are not species specific. They will affect every insect that gets touched by this chemical. And you may always explore alternative mosquito repellent or eradication methods. And I would like to invite you to contact me or Oneida County Land and Water Conservation Department if you'd like to hear more about this, because we have a lot of things listed on our website, and also happy and willing to share information directly. Yeah, so back to our perfect pollinator garden. What do we want to consider when creating a garden, or even a bigger planting, or even just a few plants on our balcony? So first of all, we want to be aware of what is blooming in our area of overseeing that we're overseeing, because we have differences in horticultural and hybrid and native plants, and our native pollinators are best adapted to the native wildflowers. And in general, it's a logical consequence. When you increase the number of native wildflowers in your yard, there will be more native pollinators present. So I would recommend to integrate as much native wildflowers as possible. So then we want to look at our early bloomers, because they have the very important role to provide a food source for the just emerging pollinators. And we are, now, and I'm gonna talk more about trees and shrubs, because those are really our earliest bloomers. But now we've entered the area of numerous wildflowers blooming or about to bloom. The golden Alexander is ready. We see prairie phlox out already, and the blue harebell is just a little bit behind. What we are done with the maple. Those are one of our really earliest blossoms. The willow is done blooming. The plums have finished. We're now in the dew elderberry. The serviceberry is going to come on soon. So shrubs are also a really important source for nectar for pollinators. So then we want to think about our late bloomers. Those are specifically important as a food source for the monarch butterflies right before they set on their big journey down to Mexico. So there we have our asters. We got a lot of our sunflowers as late bloomers, and the world milkweed. Yeah, so in general, you want to aim for at least 3 blooming species at all times. And you want to choose from a variety of colors, but focus on blue, white, yellow, and purple, because this is what the eye setup, how it functions from bees and butterflies, is set up to see the best. So here are some more examples for early and late flowering trees and flowers. So our cherries are in full bloom right now, and the blueberries are also blooming. And another thing to consider is that complex flowers, which a lot of our horticultural varieties that are bred to be really showy, are not the best for bees and butterflies to actually access nectar from, because the physical structure makes it hard for the insect to reach. And then you want to plant some grasses. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. So the next thing to consider is a water source. A lot of people think about bird baths as a water source. Maybe that could work, but unfortunately it doesn't. The typical setup of a bird bath does not make the water really accessible because there aren't any landing surfaces. So you want to have some structure like one of these setups. And I personally like the marble setup the best because it's really pretty, but any of these will work. Here there's corks floating in water. Here are some rocks, flat rocks in a bird bath that'll work too. So here now more about our grasses and sedges. They're really important for a structural support and protective habitat for insects. So some native grasses are always a benefit. And also this, for example, the sweet grass is a really pleasant grass to have around with its odor. Yeah, then nesting habitat. We all like our food, water, shelter concept. That's what we need, right? So this is what the insects need. So we covered the food, the water, now we're going to the shelter. And of course, there's natural shelters. And first of all, we gotta see what they really need. So the majority of our native North American bees, which is the 70% are ground nesting bees. So they will dig tunnels into the ground. The other 30% are cavity nesting bees. And so in general, if you have any disturbed land, brush piles, or dead standing wood that can provide shelter, that's something that you can just leave in your yard, and many pollinators are going to be happy. So here's some examples. You know, here are some bumblebees digging. And of course, you can also create some really pretty bee hotels. That's what they're called here, these structures down over here. And there's various options for that and instructions if you want to build your own. But really the most simple version is to leave dead standing wood up. Here is a structural, you know, man-made bumblebee nest. And here you see a natural bumblebee nest. Some more examples of different native bees. So a big factor in what to consider for the perfect pollinator garden is really on how we can be the change. Because that's what we can contribute to improve their habitat and their conditions of life. So consider a naturally messy garden. For example, just leave your grass up longer or create some little strips that don't get mowed. In the fall, just create a big pile of leaves rather than clearing them all out. And of course, dead stalks are also something where insects will put eggs in, and also the ones that do overwinter crawl into that. Then consider working with beneficial insects rather than pesticides. Consider a bee lawn, and I will talk more about what a bee lawn is. Create some buffer strips, and that can be on farms and green spaces, but really anywhere. A buffer strip is a transitional area between two hard edges that will allow for some insect space. Just even having a few native wildflowers on your balcony, if you don't have a yard, will create a difference. And of course, seek conversation with others for inspiration, sharing ideas, and yeah, see what other people think about helping out the pollinators. So yeah. If you do think you have to use pesticides, just think about it twice, because really a lot of plants can tolerate insect damage. Then check out the product. So know the difference between a systemic and non-systemic chemical. That means, does this chemical enter the physical structure of the insects, or is it in the nectar and pollen? How long, what's the longevity and the shelf life of that chemical? Then consider the timing of spraying. You don't want to spray when it's really windy, because it'll just be carried away. Don't spray when pollinators are active, or when the plants are in bloom, because then they're going to be full of insects. So here's a little more information on the buffer strips. So in general, you can say that they increase biodiversity and improve nutrient availability. And of course, they're also pretty. Our eyes also like diversity. We feel mentally and emotionally enhanced by seeing flowers. So by having buffer strips, we're also doing something for our own good. And here are some examples, besides farms. Golf courses, for example, are really great area. Stormwater runoff ponds, rain gardens. Here's an example of a rain garden. Yeah, so just think about, where can we create pollinator plantings? So we talked about parks, then there's roadside restoration. Then I don't know if any of you are involved in any invasive plant species removal, but after they are removed, there needs to be a restoration, otherwise that land is bare and is subject to erosion. Solar fields are becoming really popular to use for pollinator plantings underneath the solar panels. And maybe you've heard about the solar field that's now near Rhinelander. They consulted with my department in reference to which plantings to put in. Of course, recreational trails and private and public green spaces, just like you have your garden at the church. Yeah, so a little bit more about bee lawn. So bee lawn was an invention from the University of Minnesota, and they tested the bee lawn in various areas of high traffic, and they're really subsistent. So this is a mixture of grasses and very low growing flowers that is really durable and resilient to mowing. You don't need to mow it as often. So it needs less maintenance, and it provides much more nectar sources than turf grass due to the flowering components in there. And it also looks neat, for the people who like the English lawn. It might be a little adjustment, but they do look neat. And then these bee lawns can really be used any way you can think of. I mean, literally any green space could be provided and changed into a bee lawn. So yeah, I want to thank all of you for being a pollinator champion. And I really look forward to the event on Sunday and to seeing your garden. And now I'm really excited to talk about some questions or other topic, what you want to explore further from the presentation.
Baerbel, I have a question right up top. talking about flowering plants and all, we run into the problem, and we will here at the church, there's a herd of deer that live around here.
Yeah.
So, we plant things, are the deer gonna, eat the shrubs before they're big enough to survive? Anything that blooms, they'll eat the flowers. So what's your best advice? Are the native plants more durable, or, will they survive the deer better? What do we do about that?
Yeah, well, that's a common problem. So in general, yes, you want to put in some protection. I don't know what you've done so far, but there are many different options between putting up a fence to using a spray, which there's a natural spray called liquid fence, or something that's called deer guard, I think. That is a mix of rotten egg and essential oils.
Baerbel, the liquid fence is not off-putting to the pollinators?
No,
Okay.
the smell is, honestly, I don't really like to apply it because it is smelly when you put it on, but it doesn't last very long that for our nostrils to be picking it up. Then there's options for, electric measures. I use something that has an ultrasound and a really high frequency that is supposed to scare deer away. I use something that is solar powered and has like red flashing eyes at night. Then there's something that's called wireless fence, and that is a little stake with a bait smelly thing on there and an electrode. So when the deer get attracted to it, they get a little sting on their nose, so it scares them away. There's really multiple options. I don't know, what have you done so far?
Watch the deer eat the flowers. I think what we've done.
Oh. Oh, that's very frustrating.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We use electric fence around part of our vegetable garden. And, I'm not sure that's the most attractive option for a flower garden, but it is quite effective.
Yeah.
It looks a lot better than your standard deer.
Yeah, and it is more attractive than a regular woven wire or some other deer barrier. I also use bird netting around some of my flower plantings. But some of the insects can get caught in that. So that's kind of a mixed blessing. I've had dragonflies and butterflies get tangled in that.
Well,
Yeah, that's sad. Yeah.
This reminds me, this is, I don't know, I expect it would work here as well. My mom lived in the Puget Sound area, and she had a not very good apple tree in her front yard, and the deer would come eat the apples off. And she, in the spring, before the fruit started to set, would go to a local barber shop and get a bag of human hair, and she hung it in pantyhose off the branches of the apple tree, and something about the human hair discouraged the deer.
Yeah, I've heard things like that. I have not personally explored that, but there's other options, like I think there's something like coyote urine you can get to things like that, but it's also a payoff on other effects of those kind of things. That the hair might be an interesting experiment. I don't have any experience with that.
What about milorganite? Is that not a good thing? That's what I use around my hostas. Keeps the deer and the rabbits away.
Which thing?
Milorganite comes in a big bag. It's a fertilizer.
Yeah.
It's a fertilizer made from the byproduct of the sewage treatment plant in Milwaukee.
I see.
Milorganite is? I didn't
Yeah.
know that. Oh, okay.
I wouldn't use that around anything that would lead to human consumption, certainly.
Right, not for edibles, but
No.
for ornamentals or for the pollinator garden.
Mhm. I used it on my hostas when we were at the lake and we had a lot of deer and they did not eat it when I would sprinkle that around.
Okay, but are there any other questions? And I mean, just watching the deer eat the plants of a pollinator garden that you put in by the church might not be the most sustainable option. Is there anything that you have in place that when you change the planting here this Sunday that you're gonna put in?
Well, the only big thing that we're planning to put in are the shrubs that Merlin is organizing, but we have quite a large area that we planted last year,
Mhm.
and it was, yeah, you know, once it rained, it started to look like it was really plants and they bloomed, but the snowplow guy pretty much ran it over.
Yeah, and that is something that, you know, I wonder, what is the distance to the sidewalk, or, you know, that, there is a right-of-way consideration, when you put that in, and did you make an adjustment? Because is that gonna happen again? What is your plan with that?
Yeah, we don't have a plan yet. I don't know if we can talk to the plow guy and find, you know, if you can push the snow elsewhere.
So it's not alongside the road what we're talking about, but as in a snow dumping area kind of thing?
No, it's alongside our driveway and the street. It's at the end of our driveway.
Yeah,
On the
I
street.
think I'm gonna have, you know, that it might be something we can discuss on Sunday more directly, because then we'll actually be able to see it.
Yep.
Yeah, but that might be something, yeah, there might have to be a change.
Well, and that's a good example of what you can talk about for people that might be frustrated with their earlier attempts.
Okay,
Baerbel, is it possible to transplant young milkweed plants? We have been able to start some of the pink common milkweed. And now I have it popping up in places where I really don't want it. Like,
yeah,
it's just
well,
bare-
it might be, it's not the most easily transplantable in the wild, but it's possible to explore. And, you know, I want to make sure we're getting to questions that are directly because I'm assuming all of you are going to be there on Sunday. Yeah. Because we have a lot more time then to also talk, but just if there's questions that are directly referring to the presentation, I'd like to give that a little bit priority, if that's okay.
Sure.
Mhm.
Where can we go locally for plant and seed?
Yeah, there are multiple nurseries around Rhinelander. I am in a bind of recommending any. But there are some really good ones right around.
What about lamium? That's a perennial and the deer don't eat that. And the bees love it when it blooms with the yellow flowers. And we lived out on Crescent Lake and Dr. Derby had those beehives and our lamium would just be covered with honeybees.
Lamium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. First, yeah, I'd like to go back to just seeing what we want to prioritize as questions. Are there any questions that are in reference to what I brought up as on the presentation right now?
Could you
Okay.
say more about the bee lawn?
Yeah.
Because one of the concerns we have here, you know, we have a variety of people represent a variety of aesthetic preferences,
Yeah,
and we aren't maintaining the lawn as if it were a golf course, but it's still an English lawn.
mm-hmm,
And parts of it aren't doing so well. So,
Okay.
you know, would the bee lawn, I've never heard of that before. And where do we learn more about that? Or can you bring us some information sheets we can copy, or?
yeah, I might be able to bring some on paper or at least give you links. There's definitely some on the web page. If you want to look at them before that.
Oh, the
I'm
land
gonna
and
wanna
water,
see-
the land and water.
Yeah, it's
County?
oclw.org. I'm gonna wanna see the patches that you're talking about. I have some seed that depending on the size of the patch, I might be able to, let you use a little to experiment. But I'm gonna have to see it first. And it's, yeah, it looks neat. My neighbor has a full lawn of that. Yeah, I really, from my aesthetic view, don't see it really to be looking very much different than a manicured lawn. A good example, and I'm gonna have to say that it's been a couple years that I saw it, but the YMCA had they didn't really like sow a bee lawn, like as that specific composition, but their lawn ended up being kind of like that. The YMCA in Rhinelander. It had a lot of flowers in there, and I haven't seen it in a couple of years, but that might be something you can look at to get a little bit of an example.
Sylvie lawn at the YMCA.
Yeah, it wasn't, they didn't specifically plant it to be that way, but it turned into that. And I did a consult with the CEO of the YMCA maybe 2 or 3 years, 2019, and we basically determined that his lawn is in really good condition for the bees. So I'm hoping it's still that way, but I haven't been there in a little while.
What about different light conditions for the bee lawn? Because we can go anywhere from, full sun all the time to extremely shaded here in the North Woods.
Yeah, it's fairly flexible. It doesn't like just shade.
Okay.
This has been very informative.
Yeah, I'm really glad. Thank you for the invitation. And so we'll get to talk a lot more, I think, on Sunday, but I'm getting an idea on things to bring. And if you have an idea after this presentation, if you want to send me an email, if you have any specific interest on something, I can see if I have something. But yeah, but you may also just want to check out the website. What I can bring is some books that are inspirational for people to browse. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you very much. I will see you on Sunday. If this is good, I'll be good with the questions now.
Yes, for now.
Yes.
Yes.
All
We'll
right.
see you Sunday afternoon.
That sounds wonderful. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.